Hello, I'm Charles Kovess. Welcome to this week's episode of The Charles Kovess Show. Whether you're watching on Rumble, on YouTube, or listening on one of the many podcasting platforms, isn't it amazing how many ways you can listen to this program? Today, the key topic I'm going to talk about is children's education and whether or not you choose to go up the homeschooling road. I'm going to explore how the self-awareness and passion principles will help you to make wise decisions for your children's education. And if you're a grandparent like I am, to help influence the choices made by your children in respect of the education of your grandchildren. I'll also share resources that will help you consider the idea that I'm exploring today. The show notes give you links to the foundational principles of the show and background details about me, and also links to charleskovess.com and kovess.com, our websites, where you can find much useful information, free resources, and details of the self-awareness and passion quest. This quest is a high-level executive coaching quest that will transform your life if you participate in it. So let's go with today's big idea. I'm going with one big idea because I don't want to make this show too long, and normally I would do 2 or 3 key issues, but today I want to focus on this one big idea because education is a big idea, and it's a big issue, and it's a big challenge for many of us. So over the 212 episodes so far of this show, I have spoken a lot about education. I loved my education. I had a great time at school and university in my honours degree in law, and I got a master's degree in law. I love learning. I'm a lifelong learner. I say, as you've heard me say many times, you need to be a lifelong learner because circumstances around us are changing relentlessly and ever faster. I also love education, and that's why I am an educator. There's a wonderful quote about education by an American speaker called Charlie Tremendous Jones. Tremendous was his self-declared moniker, Charlie Tremendous Jones. And he said, in 5 years, you will be the same person you are today, except for the books that you read and the people you meet. And of course, inherent in that is that the books that you read educate you and the people you meet educate you. Education transforms us. So, a key consideration is what is a good education, good in inverted commas. The amazing fact is that all of us have different views about what a good education is. Good for what? Are you going to be a carpenter like my younger brother, or a lawyer, or an engineer like my older brother, or a kindergarten teacher like my younger sister? What does it mean to be well educated? I say there's no agreement. I've had people in my audiences trying to argue the toss about what a good education is and convince everybody that that's what a good education is. I've been chairman for 5 years of a school council where people would complain about what was happening at school, but I said, great, let's talk about what should or should not be happening at a school. So let's have a conversation about what a good education is, and no one could agree. Isn't that amazing? We know education is important, most of us, but we can't agree on what that is. I know many highly competent people in life in so many ways who had a shitty education, literally a shitty education. I know other people who might have had a good education, but they hated school. It is not true that if you have what I might call a bad education, that you will not be successful in life. Because after all, I've explored in earlier episodes, and of course the listing of all my episodes is available on the channels where they're published. I've talked about this whole question of success. You know, it's such an important question, isn't it? You need to have a good education so you're successful. What does it mean to be successful? I have shared it with you. Best definition I know. I use it in my life all the time. I teach it in all my programs. Success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. Now, if you're well educated, if you are educated, your ability to progressively realize a worthy ideal might be enhanced, but it might not be enhanced. So you started to deal with some very loose concepts here. The decision you make on the type of education for your children or grandchildren, homeschooling or sending them to a school, is hardly going to be determinative of whether or not they are successful. Next, in Australia, in the USA, in the UK, Canada, many children at schools these days are having a very shitty experience, to use my technical term. It is not inspiring them. It is not nurturing them. It is not fulfilling them. And they go to school because the system says you have to go to school unless you do homeschooling. Why would you put a child through years of shitty experiences because you think it's going to help them be successful? That's the question that you have to consider. I say schools are far worse these days than they were when I was at school. And I say that's deliberate. I will unpack what some of that means. My core criticism of schools is the lack of spiritual education and spirituality in government schools, and it's also creeping into private schools. Lack of spirituality, lack of religious principles, lack of exploration of religious principles, lack of our human spirituality being discussed. That is deliberate, because I say to you, and you've heard me on previous episodes again, that your access to your spirituality is a crucial element in your human capacity and capability. So if you put your child into a non-spiritual environment and mixing with kids and teachers who have no commitment to spirituality, no overt commitment to spirituality, they will suffer as a consequence. They will learn, oh, there's no such thing as spirituality. We don't need to worry about spirituality. And then when they finish school, their whole life experience is different to someone who has a deep sense of spirituality. So, having regard to all of those factors, I say homeschooling is a very viable choice for many people to make. And indeed, I've been consulting with family members recently on this topic. And when parents say, I'm thinking of homeschooling for a child, I'm all in favour of it. I'm all in favour of it because of the following factors, as well as the previous overarching principles that I discussed. Firstly, there are homeschooling courses readily available all around the world, so you don't have to create a curriculum to do homeschooling. Secondly, it's remarkably efficient doing homeschooling. I have parents that I know do homeschooling. They're not highly educated themselves, but the course guidelines are eminently acceptable. And in 1.5 hours, a day's work can be covered in homeschooling compared to getting to school at 8:30, leaving at 3:30, a 7-hour experience for 1.5 hours of effective learning. So the time efficiency is wonderful. Thirdly, I know families who have now been 3 generations of homeschooling, all of them having gone to university. There is no principle that says you do homeschooling, you don't go to university. Fourthly, people say, oh, children miss out on the socializing aspects, on mixing with other kids. Well, I know many people whose experience at school was shitty because of the socialization of having to mix with kids was in a very bad way. You know, there's positives of socializing and there's negatives. And there are many ways where a child can participate with other children outside the hours of 8:30 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. And sport, of course, is one of those examples, but so are amateur theatre groups. Look, as I said, my last week's show was on about imagination. I could think of 50 ways that you can give social experiences to children who are being homeschooled. One of those that's happening in Melbourne is parents whose children are being homeschooled create their own social groups. Next item is effective use of time. I've touched on that, but I'll make it as a key point. Kids aren't wasting time, and kids' brains work much faster than what's happening at school, and teachers are having to slow down because of the significant levels of mental impairment of children who have been jabbed with medical interventions, and the levels of autism are going through the roof. In the mid-1980s, 1 in 10,000 American children were autistic. It's now 1 in 30, heading up to 1 child in 2 is a special needs student. That has a huge impact on your non-special needs child. Next is bullying. So teachers bully students, fellow students bully other students. You don't have that at homeschooling. Now, of course, there is the issue of resilience. So, I was never bullied. I was never bullied. I was never bullied to drink coffee. Oh, I love the stuff. Julie and I have relatives who have been bullied at school. And there are some children with a psyche who, if they're bullied, they say, come on, I'll fight you. Others, it makes them shrivel up. That's a big risk to take. And children, when they come home to their parents and say, I'm being bullied, this use of the term bullied in the workplace is becoming ridiculous. We need to build our resilience, but golly gosh, you need to understand the child that you're dealing with to see whether that child is bullying going to build their resilience, or is it going to destroy their self-confidence? And without self-confidence and without a strong self-identity, you will not be able to succeed, i.e. progressively realize your worthy ideal, because you'll keep saying to yourself, I'm not good enough. Big problem for most people. The next aspect is the weirdness of your children that you're considering. Every school is weird. Every one of us is weird. Your child is weird. So you start taking your child's weirdness, the unique, I say weird, as you know, if you're a regular viewer or listener, the weirdness of your child, taking all these elements into account. What's going to be better for this weird person? Next, I've said lifelong learning is necessary. Well, if you've had a shitty experience at school, you don't want to keep learning. Someone who's talked to you about learning and education, you switch off. You do homeschooling now, you can nurture a hunger, a desire for lifelong learning that will stand a child in wonderful good stead. Next, you save money. You don't have to pay school fees. That's a big bonus. And the school fees that you can waste by sending kids to an allegedly good school are immense. And indeed, in my book, Passionate People Produce, I talk about these aspects of education in 2 chapters. And so, there are so many ways that school can kill passion in a child, and often both parents have to work to pay the school fees for their children so that the child doesn't get the parenting that child needs, that little boy, that little girl, because both parents are working hard to earn enough money to send them to a good school. Homeschooling, you don't have to do that. Next, the decision that you make on homeschooling versus school is not permanent, isn't it? You make this decision, I'm making a lifelong decision. No, you're not. You make this decision. If after 6 months it's not working, good. You enroll the child back into another school. Next, I've already said you can get into universities without any difficulty. There's mature age entry into university, and who wants to go to university at 18, 19? You can get in there at 25. Next, one of my core principles in all of my work is that you create your reality. And you have the ability through homeschooling to create a wonderful reality around all of these elements. And you say, this is going to be a wonderful experience for my child. And you make it. You create the reality of making homeschooling a wonderful education. Next, coming back to the question of what is a good education? Is homeschooling a better education than a formal school? Well, right now there's a case in the courts in Australia literally called Giggle versus Tickle. So Giggle is an online app for women only, and Giggle is a bloke who considers himself a woman who wants to join this all-women Giggle group. Giggle versus Tickle. Imagine. Well, the courts, starting with a single judge of the federal court, this will be appealed. A judge has held you can change your sex, you can change your gender. This is madness. And so if man or woman is not clear, how can you possibly say that the meaning of good education versus bad education is clear? And whilst this madness around male versus female, all in the name of literally causing you to not have any foundations in what you thought, how you thought life went on, there's a real benefit. Because if any authority says that you're doing the wrong thing, you say, no, I'm identifying that this is the right thing. And if I'm a man and I identify as a woman and courts uphold that, well, I can identify what you say is wrong as right. So coming back to the principles of the self-awareness and passion quest, the question here is integrity. What is the integrity within your family, within you as a parent, with your child, within the relationships, the integrity of the relationships that are being served by homeschooling versus formal schooling? And it's this self-awareness to understand, gosh, what do I think life is? What do I think a family is? What do I think success is? What sort of child do I have here? What sort of parent am I? And then you also have to, in the context of that integrity, understand your values. Is God important? Is spirituality important? Is honesty important? You see, if honesty is important, then calling a boy a girl is not honest. You don't want to put your child into that lie-filled school environment where governments are literally out to argue that there's 50, 60, 70 genders. That is a lie. There's not. There's two. And so this is where understanding our own values, our self-awareness, so that we can act in integrity with our values and then understand what we're truly passionate about so that we can pursue it. So we wake up in the morning feeling fantastic about what we're doing, not with a sense of dread that I have to take my child to a school where that little boy is having a shitty time and has been having a shitty time for some years. And I'm insisting that this child go to school because I've bought the nonsense that sending these children to these schools is good. That's a lie. It might be good, but it might be horrendously bad. So clarify what you're on about. My two resources today are my book, Passionate People Produce, because I talk about these education elements. If you want to unpack that in chapters 9 or 10, plus I also talk a lot about Buckminster Fuller's views of education. If you read his views on education, you would immediately take up homeschooling. And then, of course, that great song by Pink Floyd, We Don't Need No Education. We don't need no thought control. Just think about that, thought control. In fact, the Western education system is based on the Prussian system of education, which was all about thought control. So, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I hope today's show makes a beneficial difference to your life, a life that I believe is meant to be, or that you are capable of making of it. If you are new to the show, click on the links for the foundational principles of the show and my background, and also check out our websites, charlescovest.com and covest.com. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I wish for you a week full of passion for ever-increasing self-awareness of embracing the challenges that life gives you whilst enjoying moment by moment this gift of life that we have. Have a great week. See you next week. Bye.